Before you hear this episode, I want to dedicate this to my mother Isabel. While producing what you're about to hear, she was battling stage 4 cancer, which is one of the main reasons why it took so long to finish it. If you ever met Isabel, she was a wonderful human being with a lot of soul, was very giving to those in need, and had a passion for living life to its fullest. Even in the smallest corners of life, she always thrived. I like to think that I get my hard work ethics from her and my father. Anyway, I hope you learned something by listening to this.
In the beginning, when I first took to this job, I was feeling down and out after taking a year off to recover from a torn meniscus and surgery. Internally, I was searching for grit and validation of being able to handle physical labor again. Was I able to keep the same mental discipline strength like I had before? In an attempt to prove one's self-worth, little did I know I would bite more than I could chew. I got onto the Craigslist job boards for general labor. Having a lot of different job experience, I applied anywhere I could. Also, having my worker's disability running out from the state was a big impending motivator for me also. I started sending resumes with all kinds of skills, starting from barista to server, bartender, graphic designer, photo editor, skills in Photoshop, skills in Illustrator, website building, and yes, what the fuck, a writing narrator too. After some time,
There was one resume I sent out.
that I kept in the back burner, where I thought to myself, it would be an ideal position or fun job to have, so I thought. About a month went by where I reached out to the owner back and forth about meeting. At some point, he said that he found somebody already, but he wasn't sure if the guy was going to last and stick with the job, so he would get back to me if anything changed. When we finally did, we met up somewhere in Encino. He saw the car I had and said, I'll send you the address later to meet with Mario and start training tomorrow. He also said he would cover all the gas for the driving, tools for cleaning, and chemicals. Being that I was desperate to find work, I didn't really take into consideration what I was going to be earning, and that in the beginning I would be lowballed. I would later then meet other pool cleaners and hear what they were making in comparison to me, and I knew that I had to renegotiate my earnings with the boss. I'll explain the pay and the earnings later with more detail. In this episode, we look at what it's like to be a pool cleaner, or better yet, a pool man or pool boy. What's it like to work under the hot sun for hours, driving, dealing with difficult customers, but also meeting great people that made a lasting impression on me. What it really takes to clean a pool, and if you're built to last in doing the job, with no escape of dealing with yourself and what needs to be done, hate, anger, sadness, and frustration that comes due to the circumstances you're facing, every explanation you give yourself and the exploitation that you endure is something you don't understand until you experience it. You could give yourself any excuse facing hard truth in order to power through difficult situations. Any excuse of why you aren't good enough goes out the window, why you're here and no one else is, how you ended up here. It can be at times debilitating to admit what you're really made out of and have nothing to say any fucking different way. In the year of 2023, California hit a record heat wave of 113 degrees. I happened to be cleaning pools at this time. Ironically, also in Beverly Hills and other locations throughout LA. I had worked almost the majority of my serving career in Beverly Hills, which I'll save for another episode one day to talk about. Now I was also cleaning their pools, small or large, shallow or deep. I was under the hot sun all day for hours cleaning. Between Sunset and Santa Monica, up and down Laurel Canyon, Mulholland Drive, Sierra, Alpine Drive, Beverly Drive, Rodeo Drive, I would drive from one to the other, bumping music and the occasional good audio story of a podcast, and other audio literature. In a way, listening to music to save my life. Of course, not in the way of it pulling me out of a burning car, but almost literally saving you from insanity or just a debilitating monotony. The way the cleaning structure broke down was like this. First, you scrub the edges for any algae that builds along the wall of the swimming pool. You typically use a pole that extends at any length you need it to. You want to use a pool brush that's about 2 feet in length or so. I find that the best are the ones made out of nylon and are spiky, not the thin bristle kind. Thicker bristles are the best. One brand that lasts is Animal Pebble. Not to brag or gush over it, but it lasts the longest and can take a beating. You will also need a net, and a really good one too. I used to use a 19-inch Pro Tough fine mesh with a double net. And if you get a lifetime warranty if possible, even better. That is your wand in raking leaves and other debris from the bottom of the pool. Your arm strength and walking momentum, along with the skill to manipulate the debris with the buoyancy of water, is what determines your time frame in cleaning one pool to the next. Because you have to remember, you have others to clean after you're done with this one, and it's hot as fuck. Sometimes a vacuum or robot also help with the cleaning process, especially in really deep pools that have a ton of leaves at the bottom. I hated it when it rained or when strong winds hit California, because the following day, almost every pool I had on my list for the day had massive amounts of leaves, mud, sand, kid toys, golf balls, all at the bottom. This also went for other pools I had for the following days. This would back me up so much where I had to work on my weekends off to catch up. Oh, and what's a robot? A robot is a small machine that has a small yet strong propeller in the center that shoots up any debris into a cloth bag attached to it at the top. This is where it collects leaves and dirt with the thrust of the upward moving vortex the propeller creates. The vacuum. The vacuum connects to one of the suction holes along the pool wall, usually in the water. The thing about using the vacuum is, you can't use it too much without it clogging up the pool filter pump. With a rubber mallet, you can swing open the pump lid. Also, make sure to turn the pump off. Otherwise, water overflows like crazy once you open it. This also happens when your pool water level is high. The vacuum works well to clean sand, dust, and other forms of algae at the bottom. But if too much sand is caught up over long periods of time, you'll have to backwash your DE pool filter. A DE filter looks like a massive pressure cooker, usually where the pump engine is in your backyard. And yes, how can we forget the skimmer? You've probably seen it along the pool edge. A small circle with a white plastic lid. Inside you'll find a plastic filter in the shape of that circle that uses heavy suction power that leads to the pump. This collects a bunch of large debris that usually float on top of the water. This includes the occasional dead Mickey Mouse, big bugs, Bugs Bunny, and sadly a dead Tweety bird too sometimes. If you don't have a floater to put the chlorine tabs in, you can place them inside the skimmer filter also. It's important not to place the chlorine tabs under the filter of the skimmer because you can burn your pump motor that way. Once having done all that, you'll also have to do a water test. This is where some of the bio and chemicals are needed. With a water tester, you see how much chlorine is in it and where the pH level is. Both the balance of these two are a critical piece in keeping your water clear and preventing algae from taking over your pool where it looks green. To correct these two things, we use a series of chemicals, a main one being a shock, which is like powdered chlorine. To distribute it evenly, you will need to have a pump running for long periods of time. This helps distribute all the chemicals evenly in the pool. You can break your bank and head over solving the balance of these two, but it is a crucial element along with other chemicals to keep it clean. Another that's hard to manage is acid. To keep your pH level in order,
You have to use acid.
it's not only dangerous to your eyes and skin, but it's hard to maintain in small enclosures.
I think that the boss wanted to avoid using acid in order to avoid liability, because to hold and use acid is very difficult and very tricky and dangerous. Unfortunately, the formula that we used
Didn't work for all pools, which made the job more difficult. It's not recommended to store or transport acid, like in the trunk of your car that's closed. That's why you see pickup trucks carrying it in their open campers. I won't even get into saltwater pools, but they require a whole lot of other balance of chemicals to stay clean. They're more expensive over time to maintain. And yes, for all you knuckleheads out there, they also use chemicals to stay clean and maintain. Just because it uses salt, it doesn't mean it doesn't have chemicals. To my understanding, saltwater pools generate their own chlorine. Even though you can't smell the chlorine, it doesn't mean it isn't there. There was a pool I would clean in Beverly Hills every Tuesday. The house and pool were owned by an older couple that would rent their house to people while they lived there too. One day, the lady I'll call Margaret and her husband we'll call Bob came out when I was training with Mario.
we happened to see a different couple that I guess were probably staying there They were in the swimming pool with their little boy.
Mario didn't speak much English, so he asked me to explain to them that we had to skip their pool from cleaning it
Because there's people in it.
and we had to use chemicals to clean it. We noticed the chlorine level was off in the test, so it needed to be shocked. Once I explained this to Margaret, she went crazy over the fact that we were using chemicals in her pool. She was under the impression that saltwater pools don't use chemicals, so she was losing it on us for having to shock it and that maybe we should leave. We did.
Shortly after we left, we got a text from the boss
saying that Margaret said it looked like he hired random guys off the street to clean her pool. I explained to my boss that it was low on chlorine
and needs to be shocked in order to keep the chlorine levels up, but she refused to let us do it, and that we had to use more than the usual amount because her pool's really big.
And that also, she wouldn't even let us put chlorine tabs in the skimmer. My boss sided with us silently
And said to put the chemicals in when they weren't looking.
A week went by, and I went to go see that house. Bob, her husband, said Margaret was allergic to chemicals, especially chlorine. I didn't argue with him, but I said that saltwater pools make their own chlorine. I began to notice there wasn't any chlorine tabs that were left over from the previous week in the skimmer, meaning that they would take the tabs out once I would put them in after I left. Well, over time, their massive pool began to form lumps of algae at the bottom. The walls were almost close to being consumed with algae. Once the algae gets to the point of not being killed off, your pool turns into a giant cesspool, and it's a struggle to bring back to where it looks clean. If it breaks, or it gets to the point where nothing is making a change, that's when you have to drain it completely out and fill it up again and spend more money with water waste.
Bob and Margaret would later call my boss and tell him that the pool needed to be vacuumed. Well, of course, it also needed to be vacuumed, but it also needed its chlorine levels to be higher. And to explain that to them just fell on deaf ears. What they didn't understand is that no matter even if I did all the physical cleaning, it would still look the same by the following week because the chlorine levels were off.
Making it to where the pool would consume massive amounts of time to clean. Since I worked in Beverly Hills on Tuesdays and Fridays, there was this one time I went to go see how bad the pool was after a few days. I went in and saw that it had a ton of algae at the bottom, more than other times. Somehow, my timing of that short visit was perfect. Even though their little dog was barking at me relentlessly, by the time I left, I could see the lady Margaret in my rearview mirror trying to wave me down with both arms. I was pretty far away from her at this point, so I just kept driving. I can tell that she was probably going to say, "Hey, I need you to clean the pool desperately, it's so green." She later called my boss, and he went and threw algae killer, which is also a chemical and probably more harmful. It definitely helped out. By the following week, I still had to vacuum it, and let me tell you, deep pools are not easy to vacuum, clean, or scrub. Every week I would find a way to sneak shock into the pool and put chlorine tabs under the skimmer. So in case they happened to open it, they would see there wasn't any in there to take out. I knew this was working because the chlorine levels were good. Deep inside, I knew eventually that the pool was going to be bad later beyond the shock and scrub formula. Later, it became apparent to me that the formula that we had putting the chlorine tabs in the skimmer, shocking the water to keep the chlorine levels up, the one thing we didn't correct was the pH balance that required acid. I think the boss didn't want any liability. He knew that me and Mario both had cars that were enclosed. I drove an SUV, and Mario drove a 1987 Honda Civic. Both of our cars were enclosed. Like I said before, if you have acid in enclosed quarters, it could be very harmful and dangerous while you're driving, where it can knock you out and you possibly get into an accident. You may not even notice it, as even then the smell of chlorine at one point was not present anymore in my sense of smell. I would give people rides sometimes, like when I would drive my mom to her doctor's appointments, and she would say, "Your car smells like chlorine." I wouldn't even notice it. That's why open pickup trucks are the best for the job, because the camper is open to release the harmful fumes from the release of chemicals. Also, the cabin of your pickup helps you stay further away from chemical spills.
And if you think that was the only thing you had to worry about, well, you're sadly mistaken, because there was also the shock and the chlorine tabs. I can remember a few times where even the shock that we used had been so concentrated in the container from it not being opened in a while, that when I would go to open it, as soon as I inhaled, even from a distance, It would punch my chest where my breathing would be heavily affected for long periods of time. It was as if someone poured burning chlorine into my lungs. It would take a long period of time before I was back to breathing normal again. The dust that collected at the top was so fine and thin, you couldn't even see it. It would swoop in the minute you opened the lid into your lungs. You never knew when it was going to happen. It was so bad that even a cloth over your mouth wouldn't even help. Every time I would go to scoop in shock, after that I learned to hold my breath for long periods of time. The coughing and mucus flavor of chlorine was endless afterwards. That also came with trying to catch your breath and breathe normal again. It was as if you were hyperventilating or something, and you're trying to get a fresh breath of air and you just can't. It's things like this that start to take a heavy toll on you as time goes on, where you start to think that there has to be a different way to make money. Keep in mind that you're also trying to stay on schedule and go home at a decent time, so you can't let this affect you for very long. Due to the fact that we didn't use acid, some pools were past the point of no return, where shocking only added more to the amount of chlorine intense smell, where then it's considered broken. Also, who knows what type of debris is at the bottom, because you can't even see past the dark green water. I remember this one house on Mulholland Drive had this issue, but to make things worse, the renter of the house would shut off the water pump to his pool to cut back on utilities. So throughout the time that I started working for my boss, I never saw that pool ever get clear or clean. The pool always remained swamp green for months, right up until the point when he was moving out. The bottom line is, to have a pool, you need to be aware of the financial cost it comes with. Paying for a pool cleaner, paying for the electricity and water, those can add up over long periods of time. It's important to run the entire pool water through the pump at least 3 times a day, because when the water stays stagnant, and even with chemicals in it, the pump helps distribute chemicals over the whole pool when it's working. It also helps by processing the water and filtering it from debris and other things. So when a pump broke on a pool, I knew what would happen to it the following week when it turned green. There is a narrow canyon that links with Coldwater Canyon called Beaumont. On Fridays, there were a few pools I cleaned on that street, but there was one in particular where every time I went to clean it, I would do my absolute hardest to clean it quickly and quietly. The reason being was that an out-of-work cameraman was always home due to the writer's strike going on at the time. Sporadically, he would come out and lecture me on how to clean the pool and quiz me on components of the pumps and chemicals. This guy would go on and on about stuff I don't even think he knew he was talking about. He would go on about how bad his situation was and boast on how he was better at cleaning the pool himself and that he shouldn't pay for cleaning anymore, that he was doing it all himself, where I wouldn't really argue with him. I would just stay quiet and nod my head. I would play possum to this and work while he vented most of the time. I found that if I gave him a platform or argument, he would take up a lot of my time that I needed to finish, and I'd be there longer than expected. There were times where his venting got borderline insufferable, sometimes a little drastic and over the top. After a while, I noticed that he would clean his own pool because the pool was perfect. I would ask myself, why on earth would you still continue to pay to have someone else clean it if you're cleaning it yourself? Of course, I would never say this to him out of fear of losing money for me and the boss. Also, why wouldn't I want someone giving me a break on cleaning? Which is why I would clean it fast and quietly. I would organize all the chemicals and tools in one bucket in order to only make one trip going in and one trip going out. I would strategically place shock and chlorine taps in a way where nothing would make any noise, including my tools. As I rushed walking into the property, I would have his passcode memorized to unlock the gate and be as undetected as possible. There were a few times where I would see him coming out of his driveway, just missing him by seconds. I could sense he was waiting for me to show up and catch me in this almost cat and mouse game. So to this, I would wait a few minutes getting my stuff together, killing time, sometimes by over-talking to the client before him, stalling ethically in any way possible. Once I'd see him in his car on the driveway, I would conceal my body towards a wooden fence that was opposite of his property, while being ducked for cover with the back door of my SUV open. And last but not least, my straw hat
that helped me further conceal my face as I looked to see where he was. Like I said before, once he drove past me, I knew the coast was clear, so I would head in quickly. Being that the pool was clean, I would still diligently brush the sides, check the chemicals, and make sure that they're in balance. Clean his robot filters, take leaves out if there were any floating at the top or at the bottom. I got so good at doing this that he called the boss one day saying I wasn't going in to clean his pool. I explained to the boss that I did clean it, but that the guy was a chatterbox and made it very difficult to work while he's there. And to check his chlorine tabs in the floater because I was there, and that served as proof. The boss laughed and said he agreed. We both said the guy had nothing else going on. So what's he gonna focus on? Well, his pool. And being annoying to the cleaning crew. Unfortunately, one day he was there, just when I was about to start cleaning his pool. I heard a bunch of random cuss words behind me saying that I skipped cleaning his pool, and that I was lazy, and that he was better at cleaning it, and that he could put me to shame. Before I could say, check your camera, I said, oh really, you should come and work with me. I got like 11 more to clean after yours, if you're up to it. I said it half jokingly, of course, but I could tell he got more upset, but went quiet for a second. Then he switched to why his pump couldn't be opened, and that I closed it too tight. I said to him, the previous pool guy did that, not me. He got insanely mad that I hadn't cleaned it since he first met me, but I knew it wasn't dirty or even had a leaf in it because I would shine a flashlight into it to check it out through the see-through lid. I couldn't open it because the previous guy, or him, closed it too tight with a tool. My guess it was him, and he just couldn't open it back up. In my quick thinking, I got it opened using a towel and a hammer. It was clean with a few pebbles at the bottom. That was the last day I saw that guy. Being that I'd been through the ringer, dealing with harder and ruder people in the restaurant industry, this guy had nothing over me that I couldn't handle or seen before. Any normal person would have cussed him out or quit on the spot, but not me. I could see that my people-pleasing mentality had manifested a large tolerance for that type of person and worse situations. What bothers me the most is when I have to deal with close family or friends and my threshold doesn't hold up the same way. Instead, I end up losing what really matters by showing no patience or understanding, by reacting badly when they're just trying to get a rise out of me, or the frustration they have towards me insists. My week would start like this, Tuesday through Friday. Tuesday would typically start with West Hollywood and end in Beverly Hills. I hated Wednesday. I was in Tarzana all day, and I remember I broke down over my mom having stage 4 cancer, just hating over being exhausted of what I was doing. There came a moment where I couldn't get the door open to this house. It frustrated me so much I broke down in tears with the lady that owned the house when she got the door open. It'd been a while since I had any kind of shared emotion with another human being. This is a clip I found on Evolve and Focus to elaborate a little bit of what it was like and how I felt sometimes.
I'm not sure if I'm all right. Really, my emotions are all over the place. One moment I'm up, the next I'm down. Sometimes I feel so empty, as though there's a hole where my heart should be. Just an emptiness inside me. But I tend to just say I'm okay. It's simpler that way. And nobody ever asks you to elaborate on being okay. There are moments when everything feels confusing. Days blend together, indistinguishable. I wear a mask so others can't see the struggle inside. When night comes, I'm by myself, drowning in endless thoughts. Every night is a struggle, trying to find sleep while my mind races on. I replay every error, every regret. I question whether it's all going to make sense someday, if the ache will ease. Right now, it feels like wandering through a dense fog.
I would encounter a wide range of emotions similar to this. Hearing this helped in feeling like I wasn't alone, and having this mantra made it so I could power through difficult situations one more day. The lady of the house whose door I couldn't open was nice enough to say I could skip her pool for that day. But I just pressed on and cleaned it, because I knew it would be worse the next week if I didn't. I remember going to the McDonald's parking lot, and just sitting in my car and saying I was worthy of love and this all shall pass. I would manifest myself into where I wanted to be in life in a few years. Events that will transpire into greatness for me in the future, like maybe having my art or journalism be my career, maybe getting married or traveling, learning more about the world I live in. I would try to fixate on how good it felt to be alive and experience them. I knew this was only a journey I was simply on, good or bad. All I had to do was say thanks, I guess. And maybe I could move on and this would only be a story in the future to reflect on. On top of it, what also made Wednesday worse was a house that had 2 big properties on it with 2 separate pools. One of the pools was a long walk down a hill about 50 yards away from my car. Both pools every week presented a challenge to keep clean. The smaller one on the main property had a chemical problem. The big one, that was 50 yards down a hill, had a bunch of leaves from the surrounding trees falling in it all the time. The leaves were huge, and because the bleach and sunlight, they would disintegrate to the bottom. Also, while a large majority of leaves floating on the surface would soak over periods of time, which made them twice as heavy to take out with a net. My wrist would hurt indefinitely afterwards. All of this would consume lots of time to clean just on debris alone. As much as I would prepare myself mentally and will myself physically through it all, no matter what, I still felt the entire weight of it was getting heavier on my mind and physical strength. On top of all this, there were many dogs on different areas of the property that would bark relentlessly throughout the whole time I was there. I recall this one time where one got loose and trapped me inside the gate surrounding the pool. I love animals, but I wouldn't hesitate to use any means to defend myself against an attack from one of them. To this, I called the boss so he could tell the owners to come get their dog because it was loose. They did, and the threat was averted. At one point, the same owners called the boss saying I wasn't going over there to do my job. I explained that I had, and that there was a problem with the chemistry, and that a ton of debris falls in the pools every week. He relayed my message to the owners. They responded with saying that I wasn't even staying 10 minutes on either of the pools to clean them. They sent a video from their property showing 10 minutes of me brushing the pool, but that was it. I got very angry inside, knowing that I would spend over an hour cleaning both pools. The following Wednesday after that, I would be cleaning it, cursing under my breath furiously over and over. Fuck this, I'm over this fucking bullshit. Can someone please get these dogs to stop barking? Fuck! Thinking this was pointless and was getting nowhere, with no shade and dogs constantly barking at my direction, I felt I was going mad. And it was in that moment where I think the surveillance video had audio recording too, because the owner came out to greet me. We shook hands and we were cordial to one another. He asked why his pools weren't staying clean. I was as honest as I could be with him, and informing him I had done everything in my power to clean them. And I explained I couldn't figure out why both pools were turning green all the time. I noticed the owner had a hard time speaking to me, as he struggled, like this, like I'm trying to tell you something. Well, I can't keep them good. What's wrong with the pool? He would say, I put conditioner in it last week. I came to find out that he had throat cancer and a recent surgery. I could see the bandages around his neck. I found his demeanor to be reasonable and of being a decent man. All 3 of us got on a conference call with the boss. The boss would say that there wasn't enough chlorine in it, and that the amount of shock I was putting in it wasn't enough. The owner, struggling to talk, said that he sent the water sample to a different pool service to get tested, and that it didn't lack chlorine. To all this, the boss had a solution. He would throw algae killer the next day. It would do the job where water looked clear, but a bunch of sud or white dust would collect at the bottom. Then, of course, I had to vacuum it all the following week and spend even more time cleaning it. After we got off the call, I felt remorse and solace for the man. He knew I wasn't ducking out of cleaning his pools and that I was a man about doing my job. He was just looking for a solution to keep the pools clean. I couldn't blame the guy. There comes a point where you know that if you had someone to talk to or some kind of therapy, it would take some weight off your shoulders or could put what's on your mind at ease. I knew it had nothing to do with weakness, but a sense of balance that needed adjusting. At the time, it felt like I was stranded on an island by myself, stuck out to sea with no one to know that I was alive. In my mind, I would say, you got this, and you can do it and just power through. but my body and mind were keeping score and saying otherwise. I would listen for inspiration and forms of absolution through discovering many different podcasts. In a strange way, I would omit my reality with the release of storytelling from others. So let's talk shop on the business side of things a little bit. Since I never really spoke to the boss about what his earnings were or how the business was going on his end, I randomly reached out to someone that runs a pool cleaning service. I got some financial insight into what it takes to run a pool cleaning business. So forgive me if I sound redundant with any of this information. It's just to emphasize things correctly. This isn't what every pool service business costs, but it's just to give you an idea. In this particular business that will remain anonymous, the man I spoke to spent about $600 a week on chemicals. That being like shock, chlorine tabs, acid, conditioners, and a few additional costs like tools and other stuff. A month, that comes to $2,400 or sometimes $5,000 a month for him. And this is where I began to dig in more. What the hell are they earning if just on chemicals the cost is so high? With the average cost for you, the customer, paying someone to clean your pool comes to about $200 to $225 a month. Of course, this all depends on where your pool is. Let's say if it's around too many trees or bushes or a very grassy area. Why? Well, because all that debris falls inside of it. And like I mentioned before, it makes it much harder to clean, where more time is involved for the cleaner. Then it further prevents him from getting to other pools left in the day. Also, a very important thing to point out is the size of the pool. Big pools require just more of everything, like time cleaning it, more chemicals. Big pools for any cleaning service just takes up more things to do. Of course, as a pool cleaner, you sometimes don't know this and sadly get ripped off by your boss because big pools can run the customer about $400 to $600 a month or more to service it. What you, the pool cleaner, should know is pools that meet that criteria should at least pay you between $25 to $30 more just on that big pool alone. Now, in order to explain roughly what my boss was making a month from his customers, it broke down like this. Every day from Monday through Friday, I had an average of 12 different pools to clean, all in different areas. So when you multiply 12 times 5 for the 5 days in a week, you get 60. That's 60 different customers that each pay between $150 to $300, or sometimes more to have their pools cleaned every month. With the average fee of $225 per customer, the boss is roughly making around $13,500 a month if just from those 60 different customers. And that's only from what I was cleaning. Now when you add, let's say, 3 or 4 other employees that also have 60 different pools to clean for the week, the boss was raking in about $54,000 a month before taxes and employee wages to pay out. It makes me want to start my own cleaning business, if you ask me. So with this guy that I interviewed that runs his own pool business, each employee cleans about 14 to 17 different pools per day. When I did the math, that's about 80 different customers he has. So each month, with the average earnings of $225 per customer, he's bringing in about $18,000 per employee he has a month. Now multiply that by 5 for the 5 employees he has, that comes to $90,000 a month that he brings in on average before taxes, and also before paying his employees. That's incredible. I couldn't even believe that. Keep in mind that that doesn't even include the cost of cleaning your DE pool filter or fixing or changing your water pump. Now, the pool cleaner or pool boy, the pay varies on how a company chooses to pay you. What I've come across is that most pay you per pool that you individually clean, regardless of how much time it takes you to clean it. So if you clean 14 to 17 pools per day, 5 days a week, with the average being 15 pools to clean each day, at a great pay rate of $17 to $25 a pool, the average being 21, that comes to $325 a day you can earn, which is about $1,627 a week before taxes. In a month, that adds up to $6,510. Looking back on this, I wasn't even close to getting that much. I was making about $1,200 to $1,300 every 2 weeks. Keep in mind, this is all before taxes. I still had to save money aside to pay my taxes each year. I can guarantee that I wasn't the only pool cleaner getting paid like this. I came to find that many aren't paid to the estimate of $6,000 a month. Well, because you could say for the simple reasons that some pools take longer to clean than others, and you can't clean all of them in a day. But you think about it, you can maybe carry them over and clean the ones you couldn't get to yesterday. You clean them the next day, right? Also, throw in the distance of driving to locations that aren't so close in different cities, or the lack of experience. The sad and simple truth for me was that I was lowballed. I got paid the same for every pool. It didn't matter the size or the location of where the pool was. Then you throw in the formula we had for cleaning that wasn't working on all of them. It just made the dirty pools pile up, where I just got backed up, and didn't matter how hard I worked or how organized I was in my approach on a specific pool for that day. The good thing the boss did was cover the gas for the week. Sometimes it was $65 to $75 a week allowance for gas. And yes, gas prices would vary week to week. With the prices consistently going up and down, you just couldn't save or see a break on spending. And that's another big issue I want to get into. Once you get into what expenses you inherit for transportation, or to anyone who drives their own vehicles for jobs like ride sharing or any of those food delivery services I'm not going to mention specifically, the clear advantage they all have in common is all those companies don't have to cover the cost of your car maintenance. Like, you need new brakes, you cover that. Oh, flat tire? You cover that. Gas prices going up? You cover that. Oh, you got into an accident. Sorry to hear that. You still have to cover that and take your chances with the insurance companies raising your rates and having to deal with all the madness that comes with the aftermath of an accident. Another thing I'm sure most or some of you are aware of, or sometimes not, is the mileage. Even if you have a new car, all those miles add up. Despite the great condition that your vehicle might be in, even if you take care of it and never had it be in an accident, if you go on the Kelley Blue Book site, enter the make and model, enter the miles you've accumulated, and you'll see that your car's depreciated drastically over the time you've spent driving it for them. The worst I would say is if you're in an accident and you're at fault, and your car is still fairly new, but when the auditor from your insurance company looks at it and sees all the miles you've added on, they'll give you less than what the car is worth based on the miles it has. Oh, and let's say that you're leasing a car. It doesn't matter what miles you put on it, right? Wrong. They still charge you fees at the end of the lease by how many miles you've gone over. You're only working to pay a car off that probably will never be yours. It's more like a zero-sum game where you're always at the losing end. Companies that understand this are making millions off the backs of the working man that exploits his own car and doesn't know it. The more they don't cover you for any car maintenance, repairs, or accidents, the more money they save. When you add up the profits on either side, you can see the scoreboard and see you're way off in the losing end. I can tell you one story. Before any of those food delivery apps existed, I used to deliver food for restaurants using my own car. Since I was young and naive and didn't understand what car value actually meant, I fell prey to this like anyone else that has a carrot dangling in front of them. It was all about chasing small dollars from one long delivery to a short one. Little did I know reality was right around the corner when my transmission went out one night. I shifted my car's gear into drive and it wouldn't move. I shifted the gear to reverse and that didn't move either. The engine just revved for reasons I didn't know. Then when it did give in and started to move the car after some time, I drove directly home on a miracle, where I avoided stopping on red lights as much as possible, because I knew once I stopped, the transmission would lose traction and I would be stuck at a standstill again in the middle of nowhere. I would just hope to God that it would take again where I could drive the car further closer to home. Once I made it home, I called my uncle who's a mechanic. I towed it to his shop the next day, and he said it was so difficult to remove the transmission that it was as if I had used it for racing. He was pissed. After all that, the cost for a used transmission was about $1,800 at that time. When I did the math of how much I'd earned from delivering, it wasn't even close to what I owed to fix the car. So after that, I said to myself, I would never use my car for any type of delivery job from here on. After some years had passed, I guess I made an exception when it came to pool cleaning, only because I knew I wouldn't do this for much longer and my car was fairly new. But the signs were everywhere. The wear and tear is inevitable, and in the end, the hard lesson is the one fronting the bill for what's broken is yourself. One day, as I was at the gate of a house waiting for it to open, I happened to see a girl that was delivering for Amazon. She was in a heavy pace with sweat on her forehead. I asked her how she got into working for Amazon, and she suggested going to Monster.com and taking some questionnaire or test, and that many job openings for it are there. I guess I did very well in taking the test for her delivering, because I got a call a few days later asking me to meet them at the station for an interview. I still remember when I was scheduled to meet with them. It was a weekday, and boy, I still had pools to clean on that day, and the sun to talk to for hours. I was in Tarzana, and I remember organizing myself efficiently to make a small window of time for myself to make it to my interview. Dress shirt and tie ready to go, shoes polished, resume copies in a folder ready, clean shaven, and a self-done haircut, ready for anything. During the interview, I mentioned all the skills I had from computer software to the downright physical labor of cleaning pools and other physical jobs I'd done in the past. They seemed interested in how everything worked and what I did. At the moment, I thought it was to test me if I was telling the truth, but I figured it out afterwards. It was simply to see if I was prone to physical labor. And I was. I always had been, before my knee injury, of course, but they didn't know that. But I knew from a long time ago that the one thing I knew for certain that kept me in check was staying physically able to work and use my body to the best of my abilities. I knew that inside myself, I was systematic in both mental and physical. I knew that everything with a little practice and time with insight, I usually get in line with the job I'm trying to figure out. It took some going back and forth with Amazon, but eventually I got hired. Not by the original interviewer I first met, but with a different one. The first interviewer dismissed me soon after talking and filling out all kinds of information, when it almost seemed I was a for sure hire. When I got the second call asking me to meet again, I was like, please don't waste my time. They said they wouldn't and that this was for real, and they just wanted to meet me, and that it was with a different subcontractor from the first one that first interviewed me. I went the second time and was asked to join them the following week for training. You see, what I understood now was I'd rather make a proper hourly wage and not sacrifice my own car to do a job in the process. I told the boss I was leaving and that I was putting in my 2 weeks notice. He said okay, and that I was a good employee to him. I said thanks for helping me when I was down and out. I remember telling a small circle of clients I was leaving to work for Amazon and that they probably wouldn't see me again. A really nice elderly couple around the same age said they would miss me and that I was a strong person and they could see that I could make it anywhere. They gave me $40 and the zero sugar squirt soda they always had ready for me. Man, I felt so humbled by their gesture towards me all the time they did that. I can recall this one time when I was cleaning their pool. See, the problem they had was that there was 2 large pine trees where all the pine needles fell into the pool. And with it also, baby lizards that would drown in it. Just those 2 things would make it a long and strenuous process to clean, because pine needles go through the net when you're bagging them and just end up right back in the pool. The 3 pools I cleaned before theirs just wore me down. The first one being, like I mentioned before, with the dogs constantly barking with 2 large pools on separate sides of the property. Right after that, there was a pretty big one that always had green algae along the walls with a ton of pine needles in it. What I think was happening was the owners would leave the robot cleaning, but it just wouldn't do anything. Or maybe just the pump wasn't working correctly. I still don't know to this day. But no matter how much time I spent cleaning them, they always looked the same, with the same issues: green,
low on water, just pine needles everywhere. You just couldn't hide from doing the job because they were obviously dirty to the naked eye. I was so fed up by this one day. I remember thinking I just needed to leave or go somewhere else temporarily. Once I was finished, I was in a daze of how bad I hated what I was doing, that I stopped into a Ralph's just to look at people and things to distract me, and they so happened to have a beer tasting. I went to get a sample and started a conversation with the girl at the counter that was serving them. Before I knew it, she kept pouring me new samples, one after another. She said no one was drinking them and she had to get rid of them. She gave me a few more along with sushi, and I felt like something powerful or some force greater than me was giving me a little break or treat. And if that's the case, I just want to say thanks, because the message was reciprocated greatly from me. I left the store with my soul laughing of how ironic the whole thing was. Even when I was in my car, I said to myself, did that really just happen? I just laughed by myself in the car on the way to the next pool.
There was one pool I distinctly remember in Beverly Hills. It was long and narrow and very deep at one end. It had a massive hedge of leaves along the pool,
Where most of them ended up inside.
Because the hedge was overgrown and hadn't been cut in months, I would have to clean it twice a week. To clean it was a good full body workout, where sweat and strength always were involved. It would take about an hour to clean, sometimes longer. Taking leaves out from the bottom and from the ones floating on top, sometimes whole green cans would be filled with leaves. On top of all this, after cleaning this big pool outside, I was required to clean an indoor pool garden. That took up an extra 25 to 30 minutes to complete. Keep in mind, I wasn't even getting paid for the extra one, so I would skip it when I could, until one day, the lady that owned the house came to me and said if I was going to clean it. I said if I could use the bathroom. I remember I was feeling very bad and I just needed to use the bathroom, and there was no bathroom in sight. And it's not the kind where you could just go into the alley, if you know what I mean. She said to use the alley. I decided not to add any further to it, so I didn't even explain how bad I had to use the bathroom. She asked again when I would clean her small pool inside. I said, I don't know. I don't feel well. I'll try next week. I left desperately, needing to find a bathroom. There isn't a public bathroom just anywhere in Beverly Hills. I left heading to the valley saying, fuck this shit. Luckily, I found a construction site on Redford and Beverly where they had a porta potty. I just walked in and used it. I didn't even care to ask if I could use it or who was looking. I still went back and continued cleaning other pools after that.
A week or so went by. I was trying to clean it as fast and quietly. And again, the owner came out and asked me when I was going to clean the small indoor pool. She said something threatening to me about getting fired and that it wasn't right what I was doing. I lost my composure and said, they don't pay me enough to clean your main big pool, by the way. And on top of that, you want me to clean an additional one for free? She threatened me with calling the boss and telling him I wasn't doing my job. I said to her, tell him I told you they don't pay me enough to clean both pools. And $13 for a very large pool with an additional one to clean for free just doesn't work for me. Interestingly, the only thing I thought about in that moment was how difficult it must be for someone that doesn't speak English to express themselves correctly like this. She went inside the house while I kept working and wasn't going to back down on what I'd said. She came back outside after some time and offered me $10 more to clean the extra one inside. I just stood there quietly working diligently, and then she offered me $20. I said fine. At least I was getting paid for it now. After some time, I just got used to cleaning both pools. I met her older son one day who was visiting her, and I suggested that if he trimmed the hedge outside and the tree in the middle of the indoor one, that both pools would probably stay cleaner longer. I didn't think too much about it, but one day, as I go in to clean it, a group of gardeners were busy trimming the hedge. I skipped it that day because they were in the middle of cutting it. The following week, though, I had my hands full with taking out all the remains at the bottom of the pool. It was a heavy task, but at least finally I wouldn't have to struggle so hard from here on. And the other thing was that I was kind of leaving, probably my last week. Another thing about that pool was that the water pump had a leak where the water would just run to the alley constantly. There were times where I would walk in and see the water level was very low, that one of the pool steps was exposed. So to this, I would grab the hose and leave it running to fill it while I was cleaning it. One day, the boss texted me saying that I left the hose running all night and to watch out for that. I said I was very sorry and I wouldn't do that again.
Cleaning the small pool inside was a challenge in the beginning,
because you had to watch your step very closely so that you didn't fall in. It was steps with gaps in them where you could fall into it. The pool wasn't very deep or anything, but it was tricky to get around and work the cleaning pole. Once I got the hang of it, it was just like figuring out a small puzzle on how to clean it quickly. I would start with one corner first, manipulate all the trash or debris with the buoyancy of the water, where all the corners move trash inward and sweep most of it out with the net in one strike. I got so good at this that I would fake cleaning it because I was done so fast. Over time, I got to know the lady and we became friends. She would offer me sweets and something to drink. I took it when I felt I needed it and was very thankful. When I told her I was leaving and that I would only be around for one more week, she got a little sad about it. She even went as far as to say that she would pay me instead of the boss to clean her pool only. She offered me $300 a month to come twice a week. I said no thank you, that I was going to be working for Amazon full time, and I wouldn't be able to do it. She then offered me $500 a month to come twice a week, and that it would increase over time. I was very thankful to her, and gave her my number if she ever needed anything to call me. And I'll never forget Jackie. She was my last pool to clean on Wednesdays. She was such a nice lady. From all my clients, she was the only one who asked me who I was or what I did outside of work. I told her everything I could about me, about art school, what my goals were. I really appreciated our conversation. I remember when she said that I could skip her pool because there was no sunlight out. I could even remember that I'd be out there cleaning, trying to keep my body moving so that mosquitoes wouldn't bite me. I was so thankful to her. When she said just go home, you can't even see anything. It was like she could see right through me and knew exactly what I was feeling without saying anything. On my last day, she gave me $100 and said, I hope it takes you somewhere you want to be. When I think on Tyler Durden's quote in Fight Club, this is your life and it's ending 1 minute at a time, every day I felt like that. I would think about how it is I got here. And yes, for once I was outside working, seeing the sun and nature at its finest. But inside, I resented my situation. I could see the money wasn't compensating for all the physical work I endured. You see, I could handle physical work, especially when I didn't have an asshole making my work life miserable, or suffering the secondhand toxicity from a coworker that corrodes your soul slowly for years to come. Here, it was just a voice in my head and the baking sun. I can't seem to put enough emphasis on, but having the power of music to enforce my soul with songs like Un Puño de Tierra by Ramon Ayala, or listening to podcasts like This Is Actually Happening, or reminiscing on some old school hip hop like The Far Side or 3 Feet High and Rising by De La Soul. I was a punk rock, rap-loving, every kind of genre that fed my needs junkie. Sweet ear candy was a must-have daily for me. I want to say thanks to all the podcasts that helped me understand myself better. The more I heard them, like Swindled, Snap Judgment, Video Rental, Criminal, What Was That Like, Pretend Podcast, Darknet Diaries, This American Life, Disgraceland, and so many others I didn't get to mention. They all live in my heart. I also want to say this to many that feel alone or like they don't matter or exist, as if your fate is sealed to a job or life that's unbearable. You do exist, and you can change when you understand what's holding you back from you. It's only a test to find what's hidden in your unconsciousness. Maybe a roadmap to personal growth and to rediscover what's been hidden from the surface of who you are inside. I also want to mention that also while producing this episode, fires ran rampant and still continue to burn around Los Angeles. The fires tore through many people's homes and neighborhoods
where around 40,000 acres and 12,000 structure fires were lost, especially in the Palisades area, Altadena, and Eaton. Many GoFundMe accounts were set up to help those in need who lost everything, like SaveTheChildren.org and GiveDirectly.org and RedCross.org. I want to thank all the firemen and aerial firefighters that risked their lives to put out the raging fires, and to all the people that have donated out of the goodness of their hearts. It was also said that 10,000 firefighters volunteered from Mexico along with Canada to help put out the fires also. And as an Angelino, and seeing how close this hit home, I want to thank everyone personally from the bottom of my heart for coming together in these tough times. Los Angeles will get back up.